Hello, everybody, and welcome today. My name is Jocelyn Seaburn. I am a graduate student in the Gifted and Created Teaching Master's Pathway. And today I would like to talk to you about a specific group of children that we serve, which is twice exceptional children. And we're going to narrow that down even more to talk about the gifted children who also have autism spectrum disorder. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term twice exceptional, or as it's sometimes abbreviated 2E, what this is a gifted child who also has blank, a gifted child who is also autistic, a gifted child who has ADHD, who has OCD. Okay, so it's a gifted child who has another existing diagnosis, okay? I'm going to read you a statement, and then I want you to take a moment to think about whether you agree or disagree. All gifted children have one leg on the autism spectrum. So all gifted children are autistic. All right, so that is actually a myth. Now, let's talk about why some people think that. And then we are going to break down the differences between giftedness and autism. We're also going to discuss how to appropriately teach, accommodate, and modify your instruction for twice exceptional gifted autistic children, and we're going to wrap it up by discussing some laws. So why is this necessary in order to serve these children in these ways? Okay, let's get into it. So if you're one of those people who thought that my statement that gifted children are autistic is true, there's probably some reason behind this this chain of thought here. Okay, because giftedness and autism can look a lot alike. If we look at these categories on the side here, gifted and children with ASD might present high levels of intrigue in specific subjects. They might struggle socially. They might have kind of a unique set of social skills. And lastly, they might put a lot of importance on habits and routines. Okay, but let's look at some of the very small differences that do exist so that you can be a better informed educator and advocate for these kiddos in your classroom. Okay, so in the subject of intrigue, gifted children might do a ton of research or really delve into a topic because they get pleasure from this. Whereas a child with autism might do the same sort of thing, but it's more repetitive or detail driven. Okay, as for social struggle, a gifted child might have a hard time fitting in with peers or getting along with peers or making and maintaining friends because they yearn for advanced conversation or a challenging dialogue that they just can't seem to get from their same age classmates. An autistic child might struggle socially because he or she has difficulty reading body language or understanding social cues. So there might be some awkwardness in interactions with peers because some of those unspoken rules or sort of laws of conversation are kind of go over an autistic child's head at times. Okay. As for conversationally, when we're speaking about gifted and autistic children, it is not unusual at all for these children to have a very, very advanced vocabulary. For gifted children, this would be, again, they're speaking very much like a little adult, okay? And their storytelling skills might be beyond anything you've heard from a child of this age. An autistic child, where they still have this advanced conversation or advanced vocabulary, they might be much more literal in how they present information. They might miss certain things like jokes or sarcasm, okay? And they might repeat phrases such as, for instance, or well, actually, or as a matter of fact, okay? And then, as I had mentioned before, gifted children and autistic children oftentimes both feel a need to have structure or routine in everyday task. But for gifted children, this is based more in perfectionism. They want things to be a specific way. And so they might have a routine that is established so that these things can get done to this high level of this high standard that they have set for themselves. An autistic child might crave routine because it's comforting. And if this routine or this schedule is broken, an autistic child might be uncomfortable. Can I go? Okay, there we go. And then let's continue this here. How to tell giftedness from autism. Prolonged intensity. So when we're talking about gifted children experience their five senses as well as their emotions very intense compared to neurotypical peers. Okay, but if you as the educator or even as you as a parent have a suspicion that some of the intensity is going on a bit long, or it's maybe to a certain level, or its seriousness that is maybe just beyond that just can't be explained away by just giftedness alone, you might be looking at a child who's autistic or even twice exceptional, gifted and autistic. Okay, let's talk statistics, because really speaking, the number of gifted children who are autistic, or flip it, autistic children who are gifted, is quite small. So let me read through these bullet points, and then I have some visuals to kind of help you visualize, and I will illustrate these numbers. So 3 to 5% of the population is believed to be gifted. You might see some different numbers out there, but this is the one that kind of reigns dominant when we're doing gifted research. And then out of this 3 to 5%, roughly 14% have a disability. And I will talk about this word disability in just a bit. In 2021, 1 out of 59 children in the United States were identified as having autism, and around 30% of these children have average to gifted intelligence. So I want to speak about that one a little bit more, because we're also going to discuss stereotypes when we're speaking about autistic children or autistic people in general. So 1 out of 59 people in the United States are autistic. So 70% of this population has a below average intellect. Okay, 30% is what we're looking at that is average or gifted. And that's when it might become a little bit trickier for professionals or for parents to identify that a child is autistic, because they're not displaying the normal signs of autism. Okay, let's look at these numbers though. So 3 to 5% of the population is believed to be gifted. So here I have 100, and I have 3 squares colored in. That's 3%. Okay, if we had 100 people, maybe 3 are gifted, or 4, or 5. Okay, now out of these children, roughly 14 have a disability. A disability as defined by the IDEA standards. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act breaks disability categories into 13 categories. So out of this 3 to 5%, roughly 14% of these kids have a disability. So now we're talking about, look at overall at this large square and then this little tiny red space. That's what percent of the overall population is gifted and has a disability. Now let's break it down even more. Autism is only one of the 13 disability categories. And so that looks like this. Now look at this overall square and look at the pink that I have highlighted. Okay. When we're talking about the population, that pink represents the amount or the number or the percentage of gifted autistic children. Okay, so it's really quite small, and saying that all gifted children are autistic is really a blanket statement. Okay, now this next one out of 59 children in the US have autism. And that's what this looks like, 1 out of 59. Here's a visual representation. Okay, and then I broke it down more. Now you can see this blue on this overall table that I have. That blue portion, that's that 30% that are average to gifted intelligence. So when we're speaking about giftedness only, it's quite small even compared to just that blue. Let's move on. So why don't people recognize that a gifted child is also autistic? We talked about some of those very small distinctions, but let's talk about some more real life applicable examples here. So parents may be invalidated by experts who say, don't be concerned. Because you have a child who's brilliant, they're excelling in many subjects, but a parent says, I feel like something just can't be explained with giftedness alone, as I said earlier. My child is really having a hard time with this, or my child really fixates on this, or my child behaves this way. But experts say, don't worry about it. Kids are kids. All kids are different. Okay, so they never really get any answers that they need. They're never given a label or a diagnosis for their child because, and this brings me to bullet point 2, professionals oftentimes don't know how to spot low autism. So professionals are looking out for that 70% of autistic children or people who have low intelligence, and they're not necessarily keeping an eye out for that 30%. Okay. Gifted children and autistic children can both show advanced speech or hyperlexia. So this falls back into that 30 versus 70 thing that I have mentioned a few times now. So you might have an autistic child who's really advanced in their vocabulary and their reading skills. And so you don't, as the educator, believe that this child is autistic. Okay, and this is often contributed to the fact that when we do see autistic people on screen or in plays, they are more of a stereotypical autistic person. And so this low ASD becomes hard for us to recognize. Okay. And also a gifted child's autism might just be explained as this kid is a little bit different, a little bit weird. You as an educator or even a medical professional might say, parents, your kid's just a little unique, okay? Your kid has some quirks, okay? Or maybe peers say, that kid, he's just kind of odd. He's different from us. But it's more than just being weird, okay? Lastly, here on this slide, a gifted autistic child might not be recognized because he or she tests on level, even though he or she is expressing a struggle, and again, might be dismissed by school or medical personnel. So gifted children underachieve sometimes because there's so much pressure that they almost begin to block out what needs to be done because there's an anxiety that exists in the pressure. Okay, and some gifted children struggle if they do not have mastery of a subject right away. And so And I do feel that many educators know, well, you might not be gifted in all subjects. So if you have a kiddo that's struggling, you say, you know what, it's fine. Everyone struggles. You can't be good at everything. Okay, but if a child or a parent is repeatedly telling you, no, I think there's more to this, then take them seriously. Okay. The struggle of being autistic and gifted twice exceptional is sort of twofold. Let's hit these bullet points. So if giftedness is identified before a developmental disability, a child might be seen as lazy or defiant. So when a gifted autistic child is struggling or trying to work through or even ignoring and stepping away from a challenge, they might be seen as lazy or defiant. But this might just be the autism and the giftedness working together, and this child is truly having a difficult time. Okay. And on the flip side of that, when autism is diagnosed first, the child is at risk for never even being considered gifted. Sometimes, and this is sad to say, but it is a reality that we need to discuss. Sometimes educators see that a child is autistic and they put them in that one box and that box alone, and that's how it is, and this child is not gifted. But that's not right to think that way, because we do have twice exceptional children. And then this might give the child a feeling that he or she is unintelligent. So that might be sort of an internal struggle that the child is having a hard time wrapping their mind around, because they're like, I feel like I'm, really good at this or that, or I have a high understanding of this, but I've been told I'm autistic and I've been put in these types of modified classes, and nobody seems to take me seriously when I say this, or it's cute, or it's funny, or it's, unusual when I say this or that. Let's take these kids seriously. So how might a gifted child with autism look and or act? So we've talked about gifted kids and we've talked about autistic kids. Now, when we have a gifted autistic kid, what might this look like? A gifted autistic child might get great satisfaction from creating lists and being organized, okay? They might also have patterns or systems that they have set. And things need to be done in this order, and that's how it is. They might also make word puns or sort of do play on words and get great amusement from that, okay? And other people might not quite get their jokes. A joke doesn't quite land with their audience in the way that they had built it up in their heads. A gifted child might insist on justice and even have a hard time accepting when justice cannot be arrived at. Okay, they might almost have a meltdown or a distress over an injustice that cannot be resolved. Okay, they might also make lengthy speech on their interest without interruptions. Just go on with facts and information and a lot of enthusiasm, okay? A gifted child's academic ambition might stem from their passion. So a gifted child might be most motivated in class when the task at hand involves something that this gifted child takes a special interest in. Okay, so then you might see a lot of excitement from this kiddo. And then on a more serious and somber note here at the bottom, anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem rooted from divide between advanced intellect and social emotional challenge might be a characteristics of an autistic or gifted child. So I had mentioned this earlier, but you might have a kiddo who knows that he or she is academically quite bright, but then socially, emotionally, or even internally is experiencing some challenge. And as a result of these two worlds kind of clashing, anxiety and depression is developed. Let's talk about some specific examples because those were pretty generalized. So if you have a child in your class who really thrives in science or reading or whatever the subject may be, but is intimidated by group settings or might shut down by group settings or not be able to work well with peers, you might be looking at a gifted autistic child. You might also see a child who writes just incredible, impeccable stories like you've never heard before, or even nonfiction essays, just brilliant, but they have illegible handwriting. Okay. You could also have a student who's exceptional at robotics but cannot understand jokes. So you might think to yourself, how can somebody's mind be able to make sense of something that is so complex, but not quite be able to understand the haha moment that was supposed to happen here. Okay? Well, good news, there are a ton of ways that we can help twice exceptional gifted autistic children. And let's talk about some of those. So number one, focus on the needs of the child. Follow the child's lead, make accommodations, and modify as necessary. Do not put too much weight on one diagnosis or the other. So don't only modify based on giftedness, or do not only modify based on what you know or think you know about autism. Look at the child. See how he or she is doing. What's happening in the classroom? What's the setting like when this child's really thriving? What's the setting like when this child is having a hard time? And then how can we help them be able to face this hard time and give them the tools necessary to be able to overcome? Because we don't want to teach avoidance, but okay, bullet point 2 here. Formally assess, because a label equals tools and access. A lot of the times in education, we all know there's a ton of laws, rules, restrictions, regulations in place. We're servicing a ton of kids, and pull out services and special education classrooms. We can't get all of our kiddos in there. We can't pull everybody out. So those services are reserved for students who really need it. And so sometimes formally assessing and giving a child a label gives them access to these tools that they need. For example, my teacher partner had a child who was I'm not a medical professional, but from our opinion, we believed he was obviously autistic, and the parents could see this too, but they did not want to come to terms with it, and so they refused to have him tested. And so he was in a general education classroom, and it just was not working out for him. We wanted to have him in the modified classroom, but to be in the modified classroom, he had to have an IEP, and the parents did not want to have the tests and evaluations done to get that arranged. Okay. Include social and emotional goals in 504s and IEPs. These should not just be academics based. Enroll the child in clubs, groups, programs. We want, again, the child to succeed socially. We want the child to succeed in life. And so get the kiddo involved and set up with some clubs and programs with children that have the same interest as him or as her, or even that maybe give the child a little bit of supported risk and a kind of a safe space in order to not feel comfortable. And social skills interventions. Speak with your school counselor or your gifted specialist within your district about this and what that could look like for a gifted autistic child in your class. And then parents, find support groups with people who have experience with twice exceptional children as well, and lean on each other and one another's experiences. So if you as a teacher have a parent who comes to you wanting help and you do not know of a group in your area, at least give them the idea, hey, why don't you look for a group, that meets, that where you and parents can kind of have a discussion and come together, once a month, twice a year, whatever the meeting times would look like. Or again, speak to your special education team and see if somebody on the team knows of a group that would benefit that parent and or child duo. Okay. Be precautious, test kids. If you suspect that a kid might be gifted or autistic, be overly precautious, because there is danger in misdiagnoses or not diagnosing at all. And I have another point about that later on we'll discuss in more detail. But if you think that this is something that a child might qualify for, then go ahead and test them. Talk to who you need to talk to, the special education teacher, the principal, the gifted specialist. What supports need to be in place? What data do you need to start collecting so that an evaluation can begin? And then make sure that the child continues to receive support in secondary school. So often, children form bonds with their gifted teacher or their special education teacher or their interventionist because they have them for 6 or 7 years at grade school. And they only have one general education teacher. And so it's easy to pull out and kind of come back throughout the day. But many times gifted programs really aren't carried over into middle and high school as much as they are in grade school. And so these children who've had these supports for, 6 or 7 years are kind of thrown to the wolves. So if you are a secondary teacher, please make sure you're still checking in with these kids and these parents and these families and the special education team. And if you are an elementary teacher, make sure that you're checking in with specialists at the middle school so that you know that this child is going to be well prepared. Listen to and take mental health concerns seriously. Gifted children do feel things very intensely. They're oftentimes very hard on themselves, and you can add in autism on top of this and maybe some social struggles. You could be dealing with a kiddo that is sorry, there was a noise that might be just having some low self-esteem, okay? So if a kid comes to you, never invalidate them or downplay how they're saying and say, you know what, all teenagers go through this, you're fine, you're going to be fine. No, take them seriously and connect them with the appropriate supports. Do not let disability take precedence. So please make sure that, yes, this child has autism, but they are also a gifted child, and do not forget that, okay? Provide opportunities for supported risk and model/coach a child how to persevere through challenge or even failure. We don't want a child having a shutdown, a meltdown moment, or underachieving and not reaching their potential because they are afraid of failure. So try to provide supported risk and talk to your gifted team about what this might look like. Okay? Praise the child for effort and skill. When a child is really gifted, so often people tell them, wow, what an amazing project, or what an incredible blank. You did so good when you did this. But we also need to praise them for effort because realistically, at some point in their life, even if things have been easy up until this point, they're going to have to try. And trying is beautiful and trying is a part of learning. And we need to praise a student who is really putting in the effort to learn. As much as we praise and we reward and recognize that finished product, okay? Check in with these kids, ask them how they're doing, how you can help. If you think, I don't know how to help this kid, nothing on this list seems to fit, why don't you ask the kid, what do you need from me? What would you like me to do so that we can help you be successful? Okay? Aid these children with organization. You might have a gifted autistic child who is so caught up in a project or a book series that they're reading right now, or trying to meet these deadlines, and there's so much cognitive overload that their room or their backpack is just chaos. Help and model what organization looks like, okay? And then academic enrichment around student interest. If you know a student is interested in this, could that maybe work its way into one of the options for presentation of objective mastery? Lean on your support staff and students and parents. Please remember that when you are on a special education or an IEP team, parents are a big part of this team. They know their children better than anyone. Make sure you include them in decisions and you're taking their advice and you are using that to mold what is happening with the kiddo in your classroom. Misdiagnoses are negatively impactful, so work with the school and district gifted specialist, okay? Talk to people who are professionals in these areas. Peer matching. This is another great one. If a student really gets along well with another peer and they're kind of at the same level of intellect and they're both really passionate about this subject, pair them with one another, okay? I think sometimes educators get caught up in this idea, well, you don't always get to choose who you work with, in a professional job, in a professional setting. That is true, and it's kind of untrue, okay? So, if I don't like my boss at work, I could always quit, okay? So I think that we shouldn't be so militant with this, you're going to work with who I'm going to say you work with, and that's that. No, even as adults, we have choices, okay? So let's give that to kids too. Independent study. If you have a kiddo who's just kind of shutting down, becoming overwhelmed, let them do it independently. And then lastly, pull out programs. Let's get this kid a gifted label so that they can be pulled out of class and work with like-minded peers. Or let's get this kid on an autism IEP so that they can pull out, and same thing, work with like-minded peers and the special education teacher who can provide those supports. Now, if you're a gen ed teacher and you're kind of falling asleep on me and you're beginning to think, this doesn't apply to me, I'm just a gen ed teacher, I want to stop you right there and say it most definitely does apply to you. Legally, you have to take an interest in this, and let's discuss why. So, IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is a federal law requiring, that means have to, requiring schools offer fair and free educations and services to qualifying students 0 to 21 years of age through an IEP. And there's 13 disability categories here. And that's, again, if you feel that a child might have a disability, speak to that special education team about an evaluation so that a label can be given and the IDEA laws can apply to this child, and an IEP can be drawn up. ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, is a civil rights law that ensures accessibility and works to prevent disability-based discrimination. So you cannot discriminate somebody or treat them differently because of how you feel about or how you interpret what they need or do not need in regards to their disability. Okay, and then Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which is also federal law, prohibits disability discrimination in federally funded places. So this is kind of specific to schools. And then it also provides accommodations. And I'll talk in just a bit about how an IEP differs a little bit from a 504 plan. So what do I legally need to know and practice continued? I gave you kind of an overview. Now let's talk some more specifics. ADA states a gifted child may also have a disability and is entitled to accommodations in special education. So this is when you cannot just say, that's a gifted kid, okay? They're just not trying. I'm not making any accommodations. No, okay? If this child has also been diagnosed as autistic, or even if you have a suspicion that he or she might be, you need to be making accommodations. It's required by law. Okay. ADA states tests must accurately represent aptitude rather than reflect the impairment. So when you are dealing with twice exceptional children and you know a child can excel, if he or she has a test that shows the child's autism but does not show their giftedness, there's an issue and modifications need to be made in how the test is administered. Okay. According to 504, a student cannot be denied participation in accelerated classes because of a disability. So you can't say, this kid is autistic, they have some quirky things going on. There's no way I'm recommending them for honors. There's no way I'm signing off on this kid being in AP classes. There's no way this child's going to do dual credit college. Okay, that is unacceptable and it's unlawful, all right? And then under IDEA, schools are obligated to evaluate children with disabilities without cost to parents, provided the child's parents give consent. And if, like I had given an example earlier about a child whose parents did not give consent, that's when you might be able to do a 504 where there are accommodations that are made for the child, but it's just not a formal IEP. But this process is called child find, identify, locate, and evaluate. And then if a child is found eligible, then an IEP would be developed. All right. That brings me to the conclusion. I have a reference list here. There are 8 references or resources that I used in order to educate and inform you today. If you want to look into a little bit more, if you want to look into these a little bit more on your own, I will leave these up on the screen for a second so you can take a picture, or I will have some handouts with this list printed on it. Or if you don't believe a word I'm saying and you think I'm a liar and you want to fact check me, that's why these are here too, okay? But just to kind of wrap this up, what we discussed today was gifted autistic children and the help that we can provide for them as educators. If you take one thing from this, I would like for you to take teamwork, okay? Gifted autistic children have a unique set of needs, and it takes a village, right? Okay. I, as a parent, and as an educator, know it takes a village. All right. So work with parents, work with special educators, and work, most importantly, work with the child. Okay. We want to see these kiddos do the best that they can while they are in our care. Here's another page. And here's one more page. And again, I'll pass those out as a handout. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you took something from my presentation that you can now take with you into your classroom. And thank you again.